This is SLP by day,
author by night,
with Tali Kellerstein and
Becca Eisenberg,
bringing the SLP writing community
together.
Hi, I'm Tali Kellerstein, pediatric speech-language pathologist and founder of the Speak Boutique. I'm so excited to be co-hosting this podcast, SLP by Day, Author by Night, with my brilliant friend Becca Eisenberg, as we celebrate the stories and voices of SLPs who are changing the game through creativity and connection. You can learn more about my work at thespeakboutique.com.
So today we are here with Vanessa Abraham. And Vanessa Abraham is a dedicated speech pathologist, mother, wife, critical illness survivor, and now a proud author of Speechless: How a Speech Therapist Lost Her Ability to Speak and Her Silent Struggle to Reclaim Her Voice in Life. So thank you so much, Vanessa, for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and tell my story.
I know. We're very excited because your book is really moving. And so I think before we just kind of get into the book, maybe you could give us a little bit of a background as a speech pathologist, how long you've been practicing, where you're working, and, kind of like your journey so far.
Yeah, my journey as a speech pathologist began in 2013 when I got my master's degree. I went to Northern Arizona University, and I've been working pretty much in school-based therapy since then. Currently still a school-based speech therapist, working part-time now. Did take about a year off during my medical journey. So that is pretty much the extent of my SLP career. As you said in the introduction, I am a mom and a wife, and now a critical illness survivor.
So maybe you could get into just your story a little bit and, just telling us, like a brief synopsis, because I really want people to read your book, which gives like the full story, but just a little bit of a glimpse of, what you went through, and also just your journey as a author and how you went from going through this illness to, writing a memoir and publishing it.
All right, so my story began about 6 years ago, and to tie in the process of writing the memoir, it took me about five, and I'll get into that in a second. But the medical journey began pretty much overnight. Went to bed one night feeling pretty good. Was out camping with my family actually, and just went to bed. Didn't feel anything coming on. Just went to bed. Woke up the next morning, overnight. I came down with some virus. I don't know what it was at the time. I just felt really, really sick. I looked at my family and I just assumed, since never in my life had I had any reason to be admitted to the ER, much less the ICU, I just figured, you know what, I just need to go home and rest. I'm really, really sick. The week before was very stressful at work, lots of high profile meetings, attorneys, all that. The week or two before that, I was at convention. So it's just been a really stressful time. So I figured this was just my body breaking down. You know what I mean? Tired, it needs to rest. So we went home, and that week it just wasn't getting better. I was progressively getting worse, to the point where I lost my voice. It was very breathy, very raspy, like a lot of nausea, vomiting. And went to urgent care. They gave me an IV because I was throwing up and dehydrated, and gave me some anti-nausea medication, and it just wasn't cutting it. So then I woke up 7 days from the camping trips, and I fell out of bed, and my husband just looks at me and goes, "You're not getting any better. This is really weird. Let's go to emergency." So I went to emergency about 1, 2 a.m. And that's when it all kind of started unfolding. They did a brain MRI. The first thing they told me is they looked at that and said, "You have MS." And I thought, well, how did I get MS? A week ago, I was fine. I never had any symptoms. And then that diagnosis progressed to other things like neuromyelitis optica, where they told my husband, she's going to die of a slow paralysis. Just prepare. Botulism, you name it. I had all things thrown at me. Guillain Barré, but then they just discounted that because my feet were fine, but yet my upper body was paralyzed. 2 days in ER and they transferred me to ICU. That's where I was intubated. That's where I had my first experience using eye gaze because I was totally paralyzed, upper body, couldn't use my fingers to type, couldn't use my fingers to, type on any type of alphabet board or use picture symbols or anything like that. The irony in the story with using the eye gaze is that it was an eye gaze device that I had made 6 months prior for a student of mine. So I woke up completely sedated. My husband's holding this eye gaze device that I made at a training 6 months before. And I remember looking at that as a speech pathologist, thinking that's not for me. I made that for someone else. But my husband had gotten it from my team of speech pathologists at work and brought that in for me to use. So as you can imagine, as a speech pathologist, I just knew I just embarked on a whole new world. Tears were flowing down my face. This is not my life. So the first ICU I was in, they could no longer care for me because they just didn't know what was going on. So they transferred me to another ICU about 2.5 hours away, where I progressively got worse before I started getting better. I was there about a month in that ICU. That's where I learned to use a PMV. I learned to use text to speech on my phone. I learned to walk again and move again, and I had a peg tube put in. That's where a lot of my medical trauma that I talk about in my book, which I'm very passionate about now, is PICS, post-intensive care syndrome. I'm very fortunate that I had a phenomenal team at the ICU I was at UC San Diego. But medical journeys and experiences are very, very traumatic. Taking somebody that was healthy, I'd never had anything more than a head cold or a flu in my entire life. And you throw that person into the ICU where they're forced to learn to vocalize again. All the suctioning, the sounds, the ventilator machines, the trauma that you go through just trying to survive is real. So, like I said, again, I talk about that very heavily in my book. So in that ICU, I was there a month. I had, I think, two barium swallow studies. And again, as a speech pathologist, every time I went into that radiology room, I thought, how is this my life? I remember looking at the speech pathologist. She knew I was a speech pathologist, crying, like, this is not happening to me. This is not happening to you too. Why are you treating me? And I'm not supposed to be here. I want to be home with my baby. Get me out of here. Um, so eventually I was discharged from the ICU. I started improving. I was still tube fed on a ventilator at that time, but went to another LTAC where it was just horrific. I get into the details of that experience in my book. It was horrible. Many thoughts that I was going to die. They were just very neglectful, to put it mildly. But the good part about being there was that I was decannulated, I was improving. Still not very able to move a whole lot. I'd get out of bed and maybe walk 20 feet or something like that, and then I'd have to rest. But a lot of anxiety. The anxiety was flowing high, so I was on a lot of medication. Depression was setting in profoundly. Again, you take somebody that was healthy and thriving a week ago or a month ago at this point, walking miles a day, doing yoga, hiking, biking, all of this stuff, to the point of not even being able to move. So as a speech pathologist, it was profoundly depressing. So eventually my whole medical journey, I should say that the medical part as far as being in the hospital setting and rehab was about a 2 month period of time. I was tube fed for 5 months or so. And when I got home, that's when all of the outpatient PT, OT, speech therapy all began, and also where the depression began. Trying to come home and find myself again, find my identity, trying to be a mom again while I'm paralyzed and can't really move much of my body. I can't get in the shower. I can't get myself to the toilet, brush my hair, dress myself. The depression was surreal to the point of constant thoughts of why, if this is going to be my life now, why am I living this? Well, I don't want to live like this. I wish they would have pulled the plug in ICU. Like, this is not what I want to be living. However, I kept looking at my daughter and thinking she deserves more. She deserves the mom that I wanted to be. So I kept fighting back, but it was not easy. Um, those suicidal thoughts just keep, it's just a very dark place to be living. And I learned more about being a speech pathologist by being the patient in the bed and learning about medical trauma than I had ever learned in my previous 15 years as a speech pathologist. A lot of these things are not talked about in grad school, and I'm trying to, through my book, bring that to the forefront and getting colleges, universities, nursing programs, OT, PT, even social workers, mental health therapists, to understand that medical experiences are very traumatic for both adults and kids. We're just coming out of this period of COVID where so many people were in the ICU fighting for their life, losing loved ones, watching loved ones die. And even the family members, PICS family, post-intensive care family is real. The family members have trauma. They have PTSD that they're experiencing. Sounds and sights bother family members just as much as it bothers me as the patient. I have a difficult time seeing ambulances. I rode in 3 ambulances. Every time I see an ambulance on the road, it just sends triggers through my body. I start shaking and crying. So I'm very passionate about that because it's just something that as trauma-informed therapists, we're educated on the effects of abuse and neglect, but there's not coursework out there talking about medical trauma. So that brings me into the process of writing the book. I would say it took 4 or 5 years to actually write it. I knew in the ICU, and I talk about this in my book because I remember looking at my doctor, and I talk about this very vividly in the book. But I looked at my doctor in the ICU and I said, I'm going to write a book and you're going to be in it and you're going to write the foreword. And sure enough, he did. He wrote the foreword in the book and he's a big part of my book and my journey. Actually, we just recorded last week a piece for CBS about his experience working with me and how he transformed me and how I transformed him and what he ended up doing with his career. Um, but it was a long process writing the book, very emotional. It brought up a lot of trauma that I've been through. So I would open up my laptop for the past 4 or 5 years and I would write a paragraph, maybe two, maybe 3 pages, maybe a chapter. And then I would close it and it would be done for 6 months or a year. And that's the way I was. I would start reliving moments or I would read my medical notes. I also had to interview a lot of my nurses, a lot of the therapists that work with me, the speech therapists. I sat on the phone with them for hours just trying to decipher what happened. And I would get all these great notes down and I'd start typing. And then I would get to the point of trying to trial a passing mirror, for example, or talking about what it was like sitting in radiology and drinking that barium. And I would just slam my notebook or my laptop shut and just walk away and just go cry because it's traumatic. So finally, it's almost a year ago, last May, I looked at my husband. I said, the weight of not having this book done and the guilt that I have for not finishing it and not talking about some of these things and helping others is weighing so heavily on me that I need help. And the only way I'm going to get this book done is if I hire someone to hold me accountable. So that's what I did. About almost 3 years ago, I recorded a series of podcasts, probably 10, 12 podcasts on the missing link for SLPs with Maddie Murray. And she's a ghostwriter. So I connected with her again. I said, hey, this is what I want to do. I know we recorded all these podcasts last couple years ago. I want to write my book. There's no way it's going to get done unless I have somebody holding my hand. I have the summer off. This was summer of 2024. I said, I have the summer off. Is there any way possible that this book can be done in 3 months? And she goes, yeah, we can do it. but you're going to have to do this, 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 this. I said, I will do it. I just need this book done. I need it off my shoulders. I need to start talking about this for my healing journey and to help others, to educate. And she goes, yes, let's do it. So we dove in probably end of May, beginning of June of 2024. It went into the hands of the publisher in September, and it launched officially on January 16th of this year.
Amazing. Congratulations. Good
Thank
job.
you.
You've been through so much and accomplished so much. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's been a journey, but the day it published, or not published, but launched on Amazon, woo, it was like, okay, I did it. It felt so good to the point of I was almost kicking myself thinking, I wish I would have gotten this out there sooner because the relief of it being done was, oh, it felt so good.
Well, there's two questions I had. The first thing, it's more of a comment, is when you talk about your trauma, also not being able to communicate during that trauma. I think that's just another perspective, especially as a speech pathologist. I mean, I work with, children and adults with complex communication needs. I think going through that in the hospital, not being able to communicate consistently is something that I think I just want to emphasize because I think that's also when I just reading your book and talking about how you want to be able to say things, but you can't say it. And you were trying to gesture like the cradle of the baby. And like I just really I think it's really important that every speech pathologist reads your book because well, all different areas, but especially speech pathologists, because I think we deal so much with communication. I just wanted to make sure to highlight that. And also the importance of AAC in a hospital setting, because that's something that comes up a lot. A lot of people will contact me because my area is AAC, and they'll say, my parent is in the hospital, my uncle's in the hospital. This comes up pretty often, and I send resources over to them to bring to the hospital, because I think a lot of times we're not I don't know, from my experience, a lot of speech pathologists may not be trained in AAC in what to incorporate into hospital. Like when my mom was in ICU, I brought AAC into the ICU and used it. And then the nurses used it with her. So I just wanted to add to that. And then I don't know if you want to comment on that, but just another question about your publisher and what that process was. And then just another comment in the fact that when you write a book, it's not just one person. It really takes a lot to pull a book together. Sometimes people think, oh, you just sit and write a book. It's not like that. It takes a team and it takes a lot of work to pull it all together. And it is an amazing accomplishment when it's done because I think people don't understand how much goes into it. And the fact that it took 5 years, I mean, I think that's a very reasonable amount of time because it does take years to finish a book, especially, I mean, just in a typical situation.
Yeah, you nailed it. A team. Especially for me, there was a lot of pieces I don't remember. Medication and sedation medications. There was just so much of that being thrown at me. And then when you're in such a heightened state of anxiety and fear and depression, you tend to like disassociate. You just don't remember pieces of it. And I had my team, you said it so well. The team that came together to help me write this book was phenomenal. I spent hours interviewing my nurses, hours on Zoom calls with my doctor, him telling me about what was going on with my body from a neurologic standpoint. My PTs were a big part of my book. Hours on Zoom calls with them, texting them, hey, what about this? Do you remember that? What was this like? What was the setting like? Um, and what was just the icing on the cake for me was my ghostwriter, Maddie. She's a speech pathologist. So she was able to understand. I'm not a medical based SLP. So a lot of this was like, what? A PMV, tracheostomy, suctioning, what is all this stuff? I'm a school based. So Maddie, I downloaded all like 3,000 pages of my medical notes and I said, here you go. Explain all this to me. Tell me what the ENT said, the voice specialist, like what was going on with my vocal cords. My vocal cords had a lot of damage, a lot of precis. Um, and I was so fortunate for her to be able to decipher what's relevant for the book, what is going to lose readers, what's interesting, and not only that, but like, what does all this medical jargon mean? Because again, my trauma was so high, I just blocked out so much of it. Maddie even sat on a Zoom call with my speech pathologist that worked with me in the ICU, talking about some of the events because it was too traumatic for me to sit through those meetings and just hear all this trauma talk of what it was like for the SLP to read my report. So yeah, the team and then my publisher, what it took for her at her end to get it launched on Amazon and designing the book cover and the team that she had coming up with the book cover and the colors, the format of the table of contents, the back cover, my bio on the back cover, all of that was, I honestly say that I feel like I went back to school. I learned so much about the book writing process, the publishing process, and social media. I didn't do much in social media before all this, but now I'm kind of thrown into this whole realm of social media, publishing, speaking now that I feel like I have a new degree in something other than speech pathology.
It is a whole new
Definitely a lot
world.
to learn. Oh, go ahead, Tali. What were you gonna say?
I said it really is a whole new world when you walk into publishing. Um, I wanted to ask a question about PICS. For since it's so widespread, the trauma post-intensive care, I was wondering if there's community support groups that have been set up, and are those local or national or international? Is there what's available for families who've gone through this?
I am so excited you brought that up because that is what pulled me through it is my support groups. So are there a lot of groups? No, unfortunately, but hopefully with my book and speaking about this, hopefully it grows. Currently, I know of about three or four, maybe there's more support groups that are in the United States.
Wow.
I attend two of those. We're really trying to grow PICS and start talking about it more. There's Walk for PICS that I would love for speech pathologists to get involved with and start understanding this. But back to your question about the support groups, those are so important because that gets us around community. And we've all learned from COVID that we need community. We need our people. We need our group of people that get us through difficult times. And those support groups, I'm telling you, I'm on the West Coast, but I can always text somebody on the East Coast that's a different time zone that they're awake or I'm awake. If you're having any, anxieties, depressions, if you're having any type of suicidal thoughts, people will text me and be like, Vanessa, I'm having a hard day. Insomnia is a very common thing with a lot of ICU survivors. So I'll get texts at 2 a.m., somebody back east or Hawaii or different time zones just needing support because there's so much that goes on with PICS. I remember coming out of the ICU and just saying, I feel like I just survived a war. You come out of the ICU, you're often cut up because of surgeries. Me, I had a peg tube, I had a hole in my throat, I was paralyzed, my body was aching and sore, and you just feel like you've been through war and you come home and you're like, okay, how do I fit back into this world? I was 2 months ago, I was going to work now, and now I'm laying in bed and I have to have my husband get me out and get me to the shower. So it's just very traumatic, and PIC's family is real too, and there's support groups for family as well.
I can't believe it's such a small number for such a big country, of
Well,
work groups. Yeah,
yeah, it's very small, but that's why we need to start talking about this.
definitely, definitely.
There's support groups for people that come back from war that were raped, that were victims of all sorts of tragedies. We need to start talking about this because fighting for your life is traumatic and it's new. And maybe that's why God put me on this path to change the course of treatment in the ICUs, but it really needs to be talked about and discussed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just have a question. What was it like going back to work after going through what you went through? Because, being a speech pathologist in a school is very, I mean, it's very intensive. There's not many breaks and, you're just sort of back to back all day. And what was that like as far as transitioning back into that role?
Well, I went back during COVID, which was a blessing because otherwise I would not have gone back. It was the world was shutting down. We were all working from home. And that's the only reason I sat back and I thought, you know what, maybe this is a good time to go back and slowly ease into it. I'm not going to go back to my site where I'm pulling kids back to back meetings. Everything was different. So I felt like, you know what, this is a really good time to test the waters. If it doesn't work, I can always go back out on medical leave. I talked to my neurologist. She goes, yeah, let's try it out. Um, and we were pretty much locked down. My school did not go back to in person probably for a good year. So I was able to work from home and it was, much easier transition. But when we finally went back in person, ooh, that was traumatic. That was hard. That was a lot of like uh, anxiety, a lot of fears, a lot of, can I do this? Can I walk these stairs? My room is on the top floor. Can I walk the stairs? The elevator is often broken, as I discuss in the book. How am I going to carry my testing materials up and down the stairs when the elevator is often broken? That was scary. And it was really hard. And this, I might shed a few tears, but walking into my office again for the first time after, basically being in war and walking back into my office again and sitting at my chair where a year ago or more, it's more like a year and a half before, I was this thriving young mom with a little toddler. And now walking back into that same office as a completely different therapist with a completely different vision and viewpoint of the career and what I wanted to do with it. I wasn't the same person. I wasn't the same therapist. I had survived something life-changing and it changed the way I treat my students. Also, going back to work was traumatic because I was reading reports. Here's a classic example. Here's 6 years later. I had a report and I was reading the student's background. Tracheostomy, tube fed, G-tube, mom was talking about the formulas and blah, 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 all this stuff. And I kid you not, I read maybe a paragraph and I closed my computer and I had to walk away because it was bringing up too much for me. His report, his medical journey, although he did not have Guillain-Barré like I had, he had something completely different. But just reading all of that and knowing in my head what he possibly could be going through in terms of trauma and the fears that he's experiencing as a young child. So I'm constantly being, as a SLP, constantly being bombarded with terminology and experiences with other people. So I'm kind of living through their traumas too. And I often have to tell myself, this is me, this is them. This is their journey. My journey is different. And I can help them. I can understand and educate the mom on or the dad on PICS and say, look, he was in the NICU. He was 3 and whatever happened. Um, but as an SLP, I'm just constantly bombarded with AAC devices, all the time. You work with kids with complex communication needs. Somebody comes in and they need an AAC evaluation, or they're, in a very, very, in that point where they're trying to transition. And this is what gets me too, that they're trying to transition to another device. And I think about my own medical journey. It was like, okay, I am using eye gaze, but now my fingers can move. And I remember being in the ICU thinking, hey, my fingers can move. I need something. I can type. somebody get me my phone. So I was like, on my little piece of paper, phone, phone. I can text to speech. I can do something more. So yeah, it was hard coming back to work. Like nothing I ever imagined. I figured I'll just, I'll get better in a matter of a month. Give me a month's time. I bought a hill. It's not the way neuro works.
Yeah, and I also think it kind of gives you a perspective of, when you're working with, let's say, kids who've been through any sort of medical journey, also just emphasizing like teaching them certain vocabulary and teaching them to be able to advocate for themselves. Because I know sometimes some kids, because I do work with kids with different complex medical needs, and oftentimes they may go to the hospital but not have their AAC system. So I think also just having something with them and teaching them about certain vocabulary so they could, be able to communicate better in the hospital. So it, I think you also offer for families, just knowing what you've been through, a very unique perspective in understanding something that I think most people will never understand because they've never been through it.
You bring up a good point of advocating for the patient, just being able to say, what's wrong?
Exactly.
Am I going to get better? Me, I was all about my baby. Where's my baby? Is she okay?
Yeah.
Can I see her? Well, I couldn't talk to her, but when I finally got that PMV, I sent her a message. Um, but just being able to ask those questions for me was life-changing.
Exactly. No, no, I agree. I remember having with my mom in the ICU, and she just spelled out HUG, hug, like she just wanted me to give her a hug, you know? And I was like, like I'm so glad that I was able to have the communication to give her so she could ask for it. So it's just really, really important.
Hug, that human connection in the ICU is so real. I spoke last week to a group of nurses and I kind of touched on that, how important a human connection is in the ICU. And we know what's going around we know what's being talked about and we want to advocate for ourselves and asking for a hug. Oh my gosh, that makes me cry.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so just to kind of, I don't know, Tali, if you have anything to add, but to kind of, do you have anything to add, Tali? Anything you want to
I
add?
just wanted to ask one question before we start to wrap up. But I was curious. You'd mentioned that you had found a publisher. I was wondering how you found a publisher because that's often something very challenging for people. Um,
That's a good question. Maddie, my ghostwriter, referred me to my publisher, and I have zero regrets whatsoever. She was phenomenal. Where there was, as you know, this is my first book. Never done this before, never even expected I would ever write a book. Never. So I didn't know a thing about it. And we would meet on Zoom often, and I would tell her that I say, I don't know anything about social media. I've spent the past 6 years trying to rehab and in and out of the medical setting. I don't know much about Instagram. I know a little bit about Facebook, but LinkedIn, Instagram, all this other stuff, TikTok, that you're talking a whole nother world to me. And I was just very fortunate that I had a very, very good team. She guided me, told me exactly what I needed to do, set up everything on Amazon. Um,
who is the
so
pub
it would go ahead.
who is the publisher?
Her name is Tamara Monosoff, Monosoff. Phenomenal, phenomenal woman. Explained everything to me, held my hand through the process. I would text her random times and just say, like, I don't know what I'm doing. Please tell me about setting up my website and doing mass emails. These types of things that, I'm a speech pathologist. I had to really accept too that I'm a speech pathologist. I know what I know and I know what I don't know. And publishing a book, writing a book was something I didn't know. And I accepted that. And I took any guidance and feedback that they were ever giving me. I just devoured it because I don't know what I'm doing. And here I am. Now I am a published author and I'm ready to take the next step.
And what's that been like as far as like the marketing and the social media? I know that's something I definitely struggle with is the kind of posting on Instagram and things like that. Like what's that what has that been like for you?
A nightmare because I don't know it. Again, I've spent the past 6 years while Instagram was really becoming a thing in the medical world, trying to rehabilitate, my priorities the past 6 years have been raising a child, obviously working on back to work, but just trying to like keep myself alive, keep my head out of the dark, learn to move again, learn to eat again. So a lot of therapy, not only mental health therapy, but time at the gym, trying to get strong again. So have I been doing anything social media related? Have I been trying to gain followers? Absolutely not. So again, I've had to hire people. I've talked to people. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I need to start talking about my book. Once my book launched, probably, I'd say my book launched in January, but probably in November is when we really started hitting social media. Hired somebody that actually knows what they're doing, help me, promote the book and get followers and whatever. But I've been doing this social stuff for 6 months and it's still confusing to me. I still don't know. Constantly calling my social girl and just saying, hey, how do I do this? Or I want to do this, but I don't know how to even go about doing it. It's not my niche area. I'm a speech pathologist, not a social media guru.
Well, on the note of social media, can you tell us what your handles are, where people can find you?
Yes, I do know that much. So my Instagram is speechless_SLP. Facebook is speechless SLP. And then on LinkedIn, you can just type in Vanessa Abraham and it'll pop right up.
Amazing.
Okay. And also, are you going to be having an audiobook? Because I right do you, yeah, that's something I think that would be, I don't know. I think people would enjoy that as well.
Yeah, that's on. I have a very, very long to-do list for 2025. I've also thought about a workbook for professionals to have a workbook alongside my book. Maybe universities, speech pathology programs, nursing programs can have a workbook to work through and understand PICs and gain some insightful tools on what they can do to help patients to go along with my book. So yeah, audiobook is one of those pieces that I think, oh, that would be a good thing to kind of embark in 2025. But my list for 2025 is getting really long, and I need to keep working to support it all. I want to get speaking at universities. That's a big one for me as well.
Yeah.
And then also how are you balancing everything? I think that's one of the other questions I have that I am always trying, as a parent, working and then also writing. I mean, how to balance it all. And also I always feel like I'm always trying, it's hard because you're so passionate about so many different things and you probably have so many projects that you're working on that you want to, so like any suggestions for others, other speech pathologists out there that how to balance everything?
I don't know if I have suggestions because I feel like I fail all the time, honestly. Like I said, my to-do list and the things that I want to do and the visions that I have, and I go, oh, I have a friend actually in Florida. And she's constantly emailing me, Vanessa, have you seen this? You need to get with Plural Publishing. You need to do this. And you need to look at Asha this and Asha that. And I'm like, these are brilliant ideas, but I only have so much time and I'm only one person. So I just kind of keep writing this list. And I figured if I can check one thing off every month, for example, Asha Books was one of the things that my friend sent me. She goes, you need to contact Asha. So I wrote that on my to-do list, my 2025, and I checked that one off. And, I have to pat myself on the back when I do get little things accomplished. The list is SLPs and moms, and, when you go to work, you're inundated with evals and referrals and at the end of each day, I constantly have to remind myself of saying, look what you accomplished. You may not have done all 500 things on your list as we women tend to have on our list every day, but if we get 20 of those done, like, wait, pat yourself on the back. You got a lot done and you kept your kids alive.
Exactly. I think that's one of the things that I always remind, and not everything has to be perfect. It just has to be, kind of just, I don't know. I think just reminding yourself of all the things that you've accomplished. Looking behind you, this book is just something to be very proud of.
Yep, yep, that was a big undertaking, and yeah, big pat on the back for getting that out because a lot of people don't. I've had so many people say, "Oh, I've always wanted to write a book about my journey, and I just don't get around to doing it." And it took a team, like we said before. It's not something that can be pulled off alone. I've had to step back and accept that, look, there's no way this book, unless I had my ghostwriter Maddie with me. She held me accountable, but I've had to have a lot of help. I've had to have help with my daughter. My mom has stepped up a lot of times. Like lately, I've been doing so many different interviews, podcasts, and I need somebody to pick her up from school or, just watch her while I'm doing things. Um, so it just takes a team, not only a team to help you write through the book, but also a team to get you through the medical journeys and the depression, the anxiety, the PICS, the PTSD. It's so many things. We just need community.
And kudos to you for recognizing where you needed somebody else to come and help in. And it I think was probably the biggest step in overcoming the hurdle to getting things done, is knowing where our limitations are and where there's people for support. And it's a big step to take.
It is. It wasn't easy to say, you know what, I'm not good at this. This is not my thing. And trying to fake it till you make it, no. You need to accept, and that's where at first I was like, oh, I can power through this book. And then year after year would go by and it's not done. And that's when I finally just swallowed my pride and just said, look, I need this done. I needed to get this out there.
Well, we're really glad that you did, and really happy to have you join us. It was like an honor to meet you and to hear your story.
Well, thank you for giving me this platform and stage to talk about it. I appreciate you guys.
I know a lot of people will learn a lot, and I hope that they access your book, which is on Amazon and also available via Kindle. That's how I'm reading it. So wonderful in many different formats, and we look forward to also seeing any future projects that you have.
Thanks. Hopefully I'll get that workbook out in 2025, but if not, it may get bumped.
2026.
Yeah, yeah, it'll get done, I just have to give myself grace and know that I can only do so much, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
That was a really powerful interview and experience to hear.
Exactly, exactly. And if you get a chance to read the book, which was really, really incredible what she went through. Um, but just some highlights that I wanted to talk about with her story, which I thought was really interesting, is that her talking about using her own AAC system
Yeah,
that she created, I thought was really, you know, interesting, powerful, like kind of just, and the fact that she was, she learned about it, she's able to utilize it. Meaning that like AAC doesn't have to be so complex. I think that's the other thing for people to know about that, just even having a board or having a book, it doesn't always have to have all the, bells and whistles for it to be effective, especially in a hospital or intensive care unit.
yeah,
I think you need something that it is easy, and effective,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And also it doesn't cost anything. You can just print it out,
yeah. No,
right? So
I also, what struck me was the emotional experience walking through with her, what she went through, and the the turnaround, who she blossomed into on the other side. It's really amazing and inspiring.
exactly. Yeah. And I also just want to highlight that she talked about just the post intensive care trauma that she went through. And that's called it's called PECS. So I just think that's, for me, it was important because I work with a lot of kids and adults with, different medical who are complex medically. And I think sometimes, we don't really consider about what that experience is like for them.
Yeah,
And I think that she brought a voice to that, which I think is really important, and she's continuing to bring a voice to it, just through her, through her, like her podcast or her website, through her book, but also she's like a really big advocate, just to kind of get the word out about this. And also she trains not only other therapists, but staff from hospitals. And I just think that that alone is like will really help, increase the awareness.
Yeah, yeah. It's a unique story, and it's one that really crosses over between biography and our field, and a place for our field, both from a the consumer point of view and the provider point of view. And it's a very rare voice,
Mhm.
and a very unique voice. And it's amazing that we have a group of, I think we're close to 2,000 SLP writers in that Facebook group at this point. And each of the 4 interviews we did was very different. So far, each of the interviews we've done so far was very different. And hers in particular really stands out as a very, very unique but still central story.
She
Yeah.
talks a little bit about how hard it was for her to even write about her experiences, and how she really delegated it to no, she didn't totally delegate. I mean, she also wrote it herself, but she
Yeah.
had help with it as well,
Yeah.
to kind of get it across the finish line.
Yeah.
And, writing a book is it's not just one person, it takes a whole team
Yeah.
to be able to get that book together. And so I think it's an important lesson in that if you want to do something, there's it's actually wonderful to be able to have other people to help support you.
The idea of having your eye on the prize. So what is the ultimate goal of
Mhm.
something happening? And if you get too caught up in trying to do all of the steps yourself, then that project is either very delayed or not done at all. And so knowing when and where to delegate or to ask for help is very key. I think people are going to get some great resources from this one.
Exactly. I agree.
This is SLP by Day
Author by Night
with Tali Kellerstein and
Becca Eisenberg
bringing the SLP writing community
together.